Welcome to Highline Community College Professional Development Day, October 19th, 2012. Hey, we're going to do Excel data analysis basics. We're going to look at some sort, filter, pivot tables, charts, and formulas. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, you can click on the link below the video. Not only that, but this will be a pretty long video. So there's a Show More button below the video. You click on that, and there'll be this table of content with minute marks, so you can jump to any part of the video you'd like. All right, so here it is. And if you download this, this is a link. So if you click on Sort by Color, it jumps to that sheet right there. We're going to cover sort, filter, these topics, pivot tables, charts, formulas, a little bit about the difference between formulas and pivot tables, and getting data into Excel. All right, let's start off on the sheet. This is topics. Let's go to DA. What is data analysis? Now, you know, we hear this every single day all over the place. And most of us don't even think about what it is. But it's really simple, right? It's taking raw data and creating useful information. So for example, here's a table. By doing something as simple as sorting this column, we get this. Now we have some useful information. We can see the of the 4 fastest times for assembling, Joe is in the, has 3 of those times. So that's useful information about who's doing the assembling the fastest. Another example, that's using the sort feature, using formulas. And we'll do this one later. We have 2 lists, and it's often the case that one list is different. So we'll see how to do a formula that tells us true when this name is also in this other list. We'll also see how to do the reverse. But again, this is a formula taking some raw data here and creating useful information. We'll also see how to use a pivot table to create useful information. Here is our data set of students, classes, or major classes and grade. Here we've calculated the average grade, the GPA, the grade point average, in a cross-tabulated table, right? So for nursing, right, click hide field list. Nursing math, right, we have 2 criteria here, right? The grade point average is 3.4. For accounting majors that are taking English 101, the grade point average is 3.2. So going from raw data to useful information, that's what data analysis is. Now, let's go over to the sheet D. Very important that we talk about how data must be set up. So for the data analysis feature like sort, filter, pivot table, you got to have a proper data set. All right, so field names at the top, records in rows. You don't want to have data sets like this. You can't have a blank all the way through. That's with a column inserted. You don't want a row either. And you don't want any blanks in the field names, right? If you have blanks in any of those situations, then doing sorting, filtering, pivot tables with the built-in features just won't work. You also want to try and not have blanks in the data set. The features will still work like sort, filter, pivot table, but sometimes it will cause problems. Control Z there. Now, very important, notice I have some notes here. Look at that. If you have a data set, it's got to be completely surrounded by blanks, or it can be touching either the row headers or the column headers. I'm going to Control Z. Got to have blanks all the way around, or row headers or column headers for the data analysis features to work. All right, so now that we know that how data should be set up, in essence, this is called a table format, right? Fields or variables or column headers. Remember, fields, column headers, variables, they tell you what kind of data goes in this column. Records and rows, blanks all the way around, no blanks inside, then you're good to go. All right, let's go over to S1 and look at our first sorting. S1, all right, sorting. Sort with 1 criteria. Again, we have a proper data set. It's very easy. We want to get these records sorted with the fastest times at the top. Now, the first time you do sort, it's kind of disconcerting. So check this out. I'm actually going to highlight one of these, go up to Home, and add a fill color. That way, when we sort it, we'll see that the integrity of the data set is true after we sort, meaning this record will remain together. I mean, the three elements in our record will remain together. Now, when you sort, you simply have to click in one cell in the column you want to sort, and the whole table will be sorted. Now, you can go to the Home, and there's the Sort button over here, A to Z. You can go to the Data ribbon. In fact, let me, there's a couple ways to show your ribbon. You notice mine aren't showing right here. You could come over here. There's that. Boop, boop. You could also right-click unminimize, and then there's a keyboard shortcut, Control F1. Control F1 is a toggle. And then there's A to Z. Those are generally the ones I use. There's also a sort dialog box that we'll look at in just a moment. You can also right-click. So right-click, sort, and then A to Z. So I'm going to say A to Z here. That'll bring the smallest ones to the top. And there it is. So Joe, wow, Joe has 3 of the 4 fastest times. And notice our record, our whole table remains intact, even though we sorted on a single column. All right, that's sorting with one criteria. Let's go over to S2, and we'll see how to sort with 2 criteria. And this applies to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or however many you would like. Now, I would like to have all of the accounting majors together and then all the nursing records. And then within those, I'd like to have the grade column sorted from biggest grade to smallest. So the way you do this, if you want what's called the major sort, and you know, this is funny when I did this. This just happens to be major, but the name for the final sort is called major sort. So if I was going to have my final sort as class, it would be called the major sort. All right, so if this is the final column we want sorted, remember we want all the accounting together, then all the nursing. And within all of the accounting, I want these numbers sorted. If that's the final sort, then you do that one last. All right, and I'll show you 2 ways to do this. Now, we can, I have the data ribbon showing, so I'll just do Z to A because I want the biggest ones on top. Notice 1, 2 columns, 1, 2 criteria. This is the final one, so I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to leave the final one for last. So I'm going to say a Z to A, biggest one on top. Notice they're all sorted, biggest to smallest. Now I come here, and now I'm going to do A to Z. Notice all the accounting are together, which is what we want. But because we sorted this one first, it's sorted from biggest to smallest exactly within accounting and then nursing. Okay, so that's one way to do it. I'm going to undo. You know, there's this button undo up here, but Control Z. Control Z is undo. Control ZZ. All right, we can also do the sort dialog box. So I'm going to click on this. And a lot of people like this because they can't remember which one to do first. This one will just allow us to select, add levels, and the one on top is obviously going to be the major sort. So I'm going to say grade. That's the field. Again, you got to have field names, right? I'm going to say values, and we want largest to smallest. So I'm going to click OK. So you can see, oops, I didn't mean to click OK. But you can see now they're sorted there. Come back up here. It remembers that it's there. Now I'm going to add a level. Zoop. And now I'm going to say major. Whoa, wait a second. This is not quite what we want, but no problem. We can fix it. Values, A to Z. Now, if I did this right now, the major sort is on top, so it would be grade, right? But that's not what I wanted. No problem. I click the sort. I can simply click on one of these and move it up or down, right? So I'm going to use it. I'm sorry, this one right here. Whoop. So when you're using the sort dialog box, the major sort is on top. That means the final sort, right? You want all the those items together. So now I'm going to click OK, and boom, we have sorting with 2 criteria or on 2 columns, accounting together, and within that these are sorted. So really, how you would say this is this is wrong. This should be sort grade. Sort grade within major. All right, now let's go over to S3. Now sorting by color. Pretty cool. Wasn't around in 2003 or earlier, but in 2007 and 10, sorting by color is here. Now you could use your sort dialog box, and I'm going to say sort by date. And check this out. It'll know. It looks in there. It says value, cell color. I'm going to say cell color. There's also font color and cell icon. I'm going to say cell color, and then it knows which colors are there. So I'm going to say red, and all of the reds are sorted together. Notice all the yellows are not sorted. But let's do use the sort dialog box and try to add a level. So what's going to happen is the reds are going to come to the top, and now I'm going to say date again by cell color, and now I'm going to pick yellow. So the reds will be on top, then the yellows. So and people, it is common that people use color to indicate that somehow these records need to be looked at further, right? So this is a huge data set. So someone went through manually, sorted by color, and now they need to sort them, get them all in one place. All right, our next topic is filter. Sheet F1. Now, filter is similar to sorting, but it has one great advantage. Now, what did we do when we sorted? We brought things together. The entire data set is still there. We just brought some particular records together. Filter doesn't do that. It actually temporarily reduces the size for whatever criteria and brings all the records. So if I filter by accounting, right? If we look back over on number S2, we were able with sorting to bring all of the accounting records together, right? What filter does is it will bring all these together and hide all the other ones. And what the great use of filter is that if you want to take just some of the records from a data set, copy and paste them somewhere else, filter is great. In essence, you're extracting just some of the records out and putting them somewhere else. A type of data analysis, a very common task given the huge data sets that people have these days. All right, filter. You can click on this button. There's a keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-L. The filter button, if you look up here, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut. It's a toggle. You can click it on and off. And what happens is this is, in the old days, we called this auto filter. It was under the data menu filter, auto filter. I think that was it. Alt D for data, F for filter, and then F for auto filter. So Alt D F F, that was the old way. All right, so what does filter do? I'm going to click the drop down. There's a bunch of things that we'll see with filter. One is that it will look through and list a unique list. Here it finds accounting and nursing. I can unselect all, select just accounting, and when I click OK, it shows only accounting. Now it's hidden the other records. You can tell for a few you can tell that it's filtered a few different ways. One is there's missing rows, so 6 is missing. The row headers are blue. There's also a little filter there. Now this is what I love about filter. And I love doing these wild array formulas to do data extraction, but nothing beats filter in terms of ease of extracting just some of the records based on criteria. I'm going to highlight, Control-C. Now notice, copy usually just does the outline, but because there's some hidden rows here, the dancing ants are dancing around just the visible cells. When I copied, it got just those, not the ones that are hidden. So now when I come over to my paste sheet and Control-V, just like that, I get just the accounting records. Now I can come here and use my Smart Tag and say, hey, give me column widths, please. All right, and then to unfilter, you can either come here and click Clear. That clears just this one filter. You could, oh, how do I turn off the dancing ants? I'm going to click the Escape key. You can also click this. So for example, if I had this on and I filtered by English, right? And I copied and pasted it somewhere else. And now I not only wanted to unfilter, but I wanted to get rid of these auto filter buttons. I just click up here. Not only does it unfilter it, but it gets rid of the buttons. All right, how about clicking on sheet F2? Let's see how to filter with two criteria or more. Now let's go ahead and turn our filter on. I'm going to click in a single cell, Control-Shift-L. Whoops. So Control-Shift-L is that toggle. And let's do accounting. And then just Math 101. So here we have two criteria. We have two criteria for the records we want to take and extract from this data set. We can simply highlight. Now, this is a small data set, and all the data sets in this video are small, so it's easy to see and learn. But there's a keyboard shortcut to highlight the current table or the current region. Especially if it's huge, it's a great keyboard. Control asterisk, and I'm going to use asterisk on the number pad. So I've highlighted it, and then Control C, and now I can come over to paste, and I'm going to paste just those records. And now I'm going to come over here. I can click Escape to turn the dancing ants off. If I want to, I'm going to leave that filtered. Let's go look at another example. F3. Can we filter by color? You betcha. Look at that. Filter by color. And boom. Control asterisk on the number pad. Control C. And then paste over here. You know, there's lots of fancy formulas for doing data extraction, but nothing beats filter for ease of use. All right, let's go over to F4. We want to talk about different filters for text, numbers, and dates. Now, here we have a data set, a bunch of transactions. We've made some sales. And I would like to filter on this sales column. Well, filter knows that these are numbers. Let's go ahead and turn this on, Control-Shift-L. And you can come here to this drop-down, and sure enough, number filters and a bunch of amazing filters specifically for numbers. Equals, does not equal, greater than or equal to. I'm going to say greater than or equal to. And I'm going to type $100. So only equal to or greater than 100. And just like that, you can see all the records are filtered. There we have it. I'm going to unfilter this. Click Clear Filter. And then I'm going to do a different number filter. Oh, this is great. Look, top 10. Ooh, how about above average or below average? I'll do top 10. But I don't want to see top 10. I want to see just the top 6. And there's the bottom, too. So you can do bottom. And just like that, I have the top 6. All right, Control asterisk on the number pad, Control C. That was like 200 records there, right? I come over to my paste sheet. Boom. I have pasted, extracted just the top 6 sales. Let's go back over to F4. I'm going to unfilter this and click Escape to get those dancing ants to stop dancing. Oh, it looks like I have a date here, but the wrong formatting. Let me show you a scary trick here. I want to quickly format this whole column. I'm going to double click and send it down. Now, immediately that tells it to copy, but I'm going to come to the Smart tag. Oh, and you can't see it. It's off the screen. Let's see if I can pull this up. Oh, the Smart tag is, oh, there it is. So fill without formatting. Oh, sorry, fill formatting only is what I want. I know that's a crazy way to do that. It would have been much easier to highlight the column and go up to font color black, right? But that's one way. So you've always wondered what fill formatting only was. That's an example there. Let me pull this back down here. OK, so dates. Oh, date. I remember when this came out in 2007. Date filters. Now, check this out. The filter knows that these are dates. Before, after, between, tomorrow, today, yesterday, next week, this week, last week. Let's do last month only. So I'm shooting this in October, which is 10. So now it shows me only last month. So the date filter is just amazing. All right, I'm going to undo that filter there. Click on the clear. And then text. Well, we already saw text. But text, you can do equals, does not equal, begins with, so begins with the letter whatever. It's pretty amazing. Now, let's go over to our sheet F5 for our last filter example. I'm going to turn the filter on, Control-Shift-L. And this is filter by partial text. I absolutely love this. Look at this, text filters. I'm going to type com for compressor. All right, maybe you just want to, I'm just going to type that and click OK. And sure enough, this was a small enough list with no other words that started with COMPR, and it brought up just the compressors. There it is. I have the telephone numbers. I've filtered by partial text. OK, so filter, totally amazing for extracting records. How about Control-C? Paste it over here, Control-V. Now, our next topic is going to be a pivot table. I'm going to come over here. Now, pivot tables. So many people think pivot tables are hard, big and scary. No way. They are one of the most amazing features, and they're amazingly easy. But before we see how easy they are, what is a pivot table? It's helpful to just have a simple definition, and this is it. A feature that can easily make calculations with one or more criteria. So really, all you need to remember is pivot tables make doing calculations with one or more criteria unbelievably easy. Some of the calculations that pivot tables do, they can do the same thing that formulas can do, but pivot tables are so much faster. Now we'll compare and contrast pivot tables and formulas later. But here it is. Here's an example. Here's our little data set. Student name, major, class, and grade. I have, in this cell right here, calculated the grade point average for nursing students who have taken English 101. Now what is this? Oh, it's a calculation. We've done average. We've averaged the grades. But check this out. We didn't average all the grades in the columns, just some of them. Well, what determined which ones we used in our calculation? Nursing was one criteria. English 101 was the second criteria. So this is an average with two criteria. Notice every single record, meaning this number here, we used had met both criteria. Nursing was the major, class with English 101. So to do this calculation with a formula, takes a big formula and takes a lot more time to create than a pivot table. All right, so what is a pivot table? Calculations with one or more criteria. Now, let's see that doing this takes about 3 clicks. I'm going to come over to PT2. All right, here's our data set. And we just saw, there's the picture. That's what we're after here, right? All right, and I have some notes up here for the 1, 2, 3. Now, pivot tables. Just like sorting and filtering, you click in a single cell, then you go up to Insert, Pivot Table, or just click on the Pivot Table button, and it opens this dialog box. Now I'm going to do a bunch of these. So Insert, Pivot Table. Now let me teach you something about the Alt keyboard shortcut. If you're in Excel and you hit the Alt key, what happens? 2007 and 10, they have these great screen tips. So in order to get to the Insert ribbon tab, I need to click N. If I was going to page layout, I'd click P. So N, and I'm going to hit N now. And now watch what happens when I tap N. Ooh, all of the items in the Insert ribbon tab now have screen tips. So I have to hit V and then T. So the keyboard shortcut for pivot tables. Remember, single cell, Alt NVT. Now the rule of Alt keyboard shortcuts is you teach yourself whichever things or features you do day in and day out. That's why they have those screen tips. So Alt NVT. Now this dialog box is great Remember, or no, it guessed right. Why? Because our data set is a proper data set with blanks all the way around. It'll always guess right if you have a correct table format for your data. I usually go to a new sheet, but just to make it so we can see the original data set, I'm going to put it on this sheet. Now, pivot tables, you have to be careful if you put it on this sheet. I'm going to say right here, if you have anything below, sometimes it'll erase it, right? I'm going to click OK. Now, it's really, there's a picture here. Notice there's a row headers and column headers and then some sort of calculation in between. And it's kind of reminding you with this picture that you can come up here and click these. But really, this whole table field list here is all you need to do. Now, what makes a pivot table so easy? Well, one thing is if you actually have a picture in your head before you start the pivot table. Meaning, I need the majors as my row headers and the class as my column headers. Then the pivot table is easy, right? OK, so step 1 is we invoked the pivot table. Step 2, well, our table has to have row headers and column headers. So step 2 is you simply drag your field names to the right location. So I'm going to drag major down to the rows. Oh, look at that. That's already amazing. The class to the column. And then grade to the values. All right. So step 2, it's 3 clicks there, but you drag. You simply drag to the location. And what makes this easy is they call this row labels, column labels. So if you imagine in your head first, you picture it, then you know exactly where to drop which fields. The values, whatever you're doing the calculation upon, always goes in the values area. Now, the final step is, by default, it will sum. So we need to change it to an average. All right, so I'm going to click in one of the numbers inside the table and right-click, summarize values as, and there you have it, average. And just like that, you've created your table. Now, there's some format. So 1, 2, 3. What makes it so powerful is that these calculations are harder to do with formulas. Proper data set. You know that inserting a pivot table is on the Insert menu. Once you get this field list, you drag and drop. And then if you want to change the calculation, you can right-click and summarize values by. Now, formatting. This is kind of annoying. It says row labels instead of what class this is. I mean, what major this is. It says column labels, not the class. So we're going to go up to Design, Report Layout, and Show in Tabular. I do that every single time. Major class. There's that note right there. Now, this is called a cross tabulation. Why? Because there's an intersection here. There's a variable up here and here. Cross tabulating between these two, we've done an average. Now, these grand totals are actually quite nice. It says it'll tell you what the average is just for accounting so you can compare. Here's the average for the nursing so you can compare. Here's the average for English. Here's the average for Math 101. All right, so pivot table in 3 clicks. Now, I'm going to scroll over using these scroll arrows. And I'm going to go over to PT3. Now, more than one calculation. Here we have a slightly different data set. Here's our end goal. We want to list from this department one instance each of our departments in our business. And then from this column, this is hours worked last year. I want to see total, the average per department, the standard deviation per department, and the count, meaning how many employees were in each department. Right? So that's 3 calculations all done. Now remember, what does a pivot table do? We're doing some calculation, not on all the numbers, but with one or more criteria. So what's the criteria? Department. We're going to add with one criteria department. calculate the average based on one criteria department. Now that's a little picture I took when I did this before. I'm going to scoot this over here. I'm going to click in the one cell in the data set, Alt-NVT. I'm going to drop it in this sheet again just to make everything so we can see the data set and our pivot table. Normally I'd put it on a different sheet. I'm going to click OK. All right, so what are we going to do here? Well, we had all those calculations. OK, we're just going to drop department down to row. So that's easy. Now notice, what does that do? That's a totally amazing use of the pivot table to get a unique list of items from a column filled with lots of duplicates, right? Now, we had what? 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to drag this hours worked down to the values areas. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so that's kind of counterintuitive. We dragged it there 4 times, but no problem. We'll go and change the calculations. 1, 2, 3. Now I don't like these wide columns, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to type the word sum. And then change this down. And I'm going to type average. Drag this over here. And then I'm going to type standard. I'm going to do SD -P for population. This is all of the records for last year, so it's a population. Population means all the records, standard deviation for the population. And then count. All right, so what am I going to do? Well, it's already sum by default. I'm going to right-click, summarize values as, and show average. I'm going to summarize values by average. Ooh, look at that. Now, I would like to show you there's an alternative way to change the name, change the calculation, and the formatting. I'm going to right-click, value field settings. This is kind of like the dialog box that has everything we need. We could have typed our name there. We could definitely change the function, and this is where we find our number formatting. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to go down to number and change it to 0. And then click OK. Click OK. All right, so this the average. Oh! I'm sorry. I was falling asleep at the wheel. That is not the total hours worked. 13 hours. I can already see a 3,000 there. I need to change this too. I'm going to right-click, summarize values by, and do sum. All right, standard deviation. I'm going to right-click, go to value field settings. Again, this is kind of like the one-stop shopping. I've already changed the name. I'm going to scroll down here, standard deviation of the population, and then I'm going to go to number formatting. I'm going to say number, show me 0 decimals. Click OK. Click OK. And finally, the count looks like it did that by default. You can check it by going summarize values as, and sure enough, it's got the count. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 calculations. Each calculation being done with one criteria. Not all the numbers. That's just the sum for accounting, just the average for accounting. All right, let's go to PT4. We want to talk about grouping. Now here's a picture of our end result here. We would like to group. So we have all these employees who work varying hours for an entire year. So we need to group between 100 and 599 hours worked. How many employees? 9. Count them 9. How many between 1,600 and 20,099? 15. All right. So again, this would be tough to do with formulas. But with a pivot table, oh, totally amazing. Alt-NVT. I'm going to put on this existing worksheet. I'm going to click right in cell F5 and click OK. All right, so now the trick is, if we want to group, we need to drag the number down to our rows. Now that's ridiculous, right? It's just got all the numbers there. But now we can simply right-click, and there's group. And it'll kind of try and guess for you. I'm going to go change this from 100, and I'm thinking about increments, right, to 3,600. And I want to group by increments of 500. And click OK. And just like that, it builds those labels. I've done this with formulas. I can tell you that gets pretty tricky, right? You got to look through and find out what the min and max is and all sorts of things. All right, now we drag our hours down to values. And by default, it's counting. I'm going to put a number and then change the width. All right? So very quickly, we have our report. Let's go up to, oh, what happened to our ribbons? Notice I'm clicked outside of the pivot table. When I click back inside the table, my pivot table ribbons come back up. I can go to Design, Report Layout, and Tabular. All right, let's go over and look at filtering on PT5. Now here I did this same pivot table. I didn't change the name here. But I'd like to show you how to filter this report. Now, what is this filter? Right now, this is the count for all the departments. We just grouped this one column and then counted everybody. So this count of 15 between 1,600 and 2,099 hours worked last year is for all the departments. No problem. There's something called a report filter. I'm simply going to drag department down to report filter. Up here, I guess I did this once before, so it remembers the filter. I'm going to come up here and select all and pretend that that didn't happen. By default, it comes up if you haven't worked off of this data set before. It comes up and it creates, there is no filter in essence, but you click up here and select all. I'm going to say finance. So now I've filtered that entire report. Now there's another way to filter. I'm going to drag this off. Actually, let me drag this back down here and unfilter it. I'm going to say all. And I'm going to drag this off. And there's a great feature called on the options, insert slicer. All it is a formatted report filter. I'm going to select department, click OK. All right, so I can drag this down here. I can size it. I can point to the edge. Well, let me see if I want to point to the edge here and drag it down. And you can format it. Notice this is a slicer option, so you can format it whatever color you'd like. It says columns. If I change this to 2, so now I have 2, so maybe it's a nicer fit that way. So now we can simply click on finance, accounting, and our pivot table absolutely updates. If you want to do accounting and marketing, you have to hold the Control key and click on marketing, and now that's accounting and marketing. Or how about accounting and finance, right? Accounting and marketing and finance. So absolutely beautiful. Filtering using a slicer. Hey, that's a lot about pivot tables. One last thing about pivot tables. Let's go over to this, and it's just want to mention one chart. Now here's the picture of what I want, and it's a column chart. It shows me hours worked in 2012, number of employees, and it's a nice visual portrayal. So charts are absolutely data analysis also. What are we doing? We're taking a bunch of raw data, creating useful information. Now I've already created this pivot table. I'm going to create my chart from a pivot table. Totally amazing. Now you could go up options, pivot chart, but you can also just go to insert. They both access the same charting engine. So I'm going to go this chart right here. There happens to be a keyboard shortcut for the default chart. So whatever default chart you have on your computer, if you use it all the time, Alt F1. So Alt F1 puts a chart on this sheet. The F11 key puts it on a new sheet. So if I hit F11, it actually inserts a chart. If I hit Alt F1, it puts it on this sheet. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit. Oh, the beautiful thing about the chart and the pivot table is if you change anything up here, it will automatically reflect. This chart is connected to that pivot table. Now, I'm not going to filter it, but that is a great aspect. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I don't want this here, so I'm going to right-click and hide field buttons. I'm going to come down here and right-click, hide. Oh, it's off the bottom of the screen here. Right-click. I still don't get it. Right-click, hide axis. I don't want that one right there. I don't need that right there. That's chart junk. I'm going to add under layout. I'm going to add axis titles. So on my vertical, let's do horizontal first, title below. I'm just typing. Notice I opened up, I said, give me a horizontal axis label. I still see the word axis title, but as soon as I started typing, look at that, it's up in the formula bar. So hours worked and then I hit enter, so I typed it. Now I'm going to go up and do the same thing. Axis and vertical, I'm going to do this horizontal. Now notice it says axis title, but as soon as I start typing and then hit enter, it finally shows up. I'm going to get rid of these lines, get rid of this axis right here, and then I can come up here and do data labels. I'm going to say outside. And there we have it, our chart data analysis based on the pivot table, based on that raw data. All right, we're going to go over to sheet number Formula 1. Sheet F4 for Formula 1. We've talked about sorting, filtering pivot tables, but absolutely formulas are great for doing data analysis. Now, we just saw pivot tables that were able to take this raw data and very quickly do a pivot table where we list a unique list, and then we could do some calculation like add up all of the hours. Now, formulas can do the same thing, and let's see how to do this. Now, what are we doing? We're adding not the entire column, but we're adding just the ones that are for the accounting department. So really, I'm going to need this number, on all the way down the accounting one. So adding with one criteria. Now, there's a great function that came in 2007. There's the old SUMIFS, but I like SUMIF. That's been around for a long time. But in 2007 and 10, there's this new function, SUMIFS. I like to use the SUMIF all the time, whether I'm doing 1, 2, 3, or 4 criteria. Now, the SUMIF without the S, that only adds with one criteria. S does one or more. And I like the SUMIFs because the screen tips are polite. It says sum range and criteria range. If you go look at the SUMIFs, it's the screen tip argument names aren't as explicitly named. All right, so what are we adding for sum range? I'm highlighting here. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift down arrow to highlight down to the bottom. And I need to lock that range, so I'm going to hit the F4 key. All right? Locking means when I copy the formula down, it will absolutely be locked on this range. It's not a relative cell reference. All right, so there's the sum range, comma, the criteria range. Well, I need to highlight the entire department column, Control-Shift down arrow, and then the F4 key. The F4 key locks it. So as we copy the formula down, those ranges do not move relatively. Comma, and for criteria, since we only have one, it's a relative cell reference. It's always going to look one cell to my left. All right, so we have our SUMIFS, Control Enter, and I can double click that little box in the corner is called the fill handle. That little crosshair, I like to call it the angry rabbit. I can double click and send it down. Now when I come to the bottom and hit the F2 key, notice those blue and green ranges are locked down there, but that purple cell reference there moved relatively. So as I copied the formula, the cell reference is always looking directly one cell to my left. All right? So formulas. I don't know, that took a little bit longer than doing a pivot table. Now the beauty of formulas is that they automatically update when your criteria changes. So if you have your data changes. So if you have data or criteria that's regularly changing, like I was able to change this. If I change this to 5,000, watch over here. When I hit Enter, it immediately updates. Pivot tables don't immediately update. Now it's easy in a pivot table. You just right-click Refresh to update. But some people absolutely have dynamic data, and so formulas for certain types of data analysis are the preferred solution. Why? Because formulas update immediately when any criteria or raw data changes. I'm going to Control Z and get that back to the original number. All right, so sum. We can also do, if we go over to Formula 2, we can do counting with one criteria. And we'll use the COUNTIF. So, in this case, I'm going to use the COUNTIF. It just wants the range and the criteria. So I'm going to highlight this entire column right here, Control-Shift-Down arrow, and then the F4 key, comma, and click on my criteria. So it's not going to count all of them, just a counting. Notice locked or absolute cell reference. This is a relative cell reference. So when I Control-Enter and double-click and send it down, I can see very clearly my formula worked. The blue one's locked, and the green one is relative. The COUNTIF counted with one criteria. Another example of a formula to do data analysis. On Formula 3 sheet, a great example. We saw this at the beginning of our video. Sometimes we want to compare lists. So here we have one list here and a second list here, and there are some differences. Now this is a small data set here, but you can imagine a gigantic data set. How in the world do you figure out if this particular item is over in this data set here? So I'm checking to see, is the name in list 2 also in list 1? Well, we're going to use the match function. The match function is a lookup function that can look up something. So I'm going to say, hey, match, look up Babs, comma. Within the lookup array is the range we're looking it up in. So I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to hit the F4 key because I need to lock that. Now, what the match will deliver, it's looking this up. And if it finds it, it will tell you the relative position. So Babs is number 1. If down here, when we copy the formula down, it looks up Jeff T, since it will not find it, it will report NA, meaning not available. All right, so what does match do? It reports the relative position. If it's not in the list, it reports NA. I'm going to type a comma. There's 3 types of matches. We're going to do exact match because we're looking up exactly that word. And we put a 0 though. So the match type is exact match. All right, you ready? Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. The numbers tell us that, in fact, the item was found in the other list. Now, if our goal is to have a true and false, and we don't want to see numbers and NAs, we can change this. But right now, we could sort this, right? All the numbers would come together, all the NAs would come together. We immediately have grouped together all the records that are in this data set and this data set. Again, the numbers are what we are after. But in some cases, you want a true or a false. So we're going to put the match function inside a second function, and it's called isNumber. Now this is cool because isNumber, its only job is to say true, I found a number, or false, the thing is not a number. So I put the match inside is number, Control Enter, and double click and send it down. So instead of numbers and NAs, I get trues and falses. Now what if we wanted to do something different? Now we are interested in the ones that are not. So Jeff T is here, but not in this list. So we'll do the same thing. Match, I'm going to look up this item here, comma, within what range, that there. F4 to lock it, comma, 0, close parentheses. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now what are we interested in? We're not interested in the numbers. We're interested in the NA. So can you believe it? There's an ISNA function. What does it say? True if it's an NA, false if it's anything else. So Control Enter, double click and send it down. It's a great use or a great example of how to use a formula to do data analysis, a common task that people every day do comparing two lists. All right, so there was three formula examples. Again, the advantage in the SUMIFS example is the immediacy of a formula. It immediately updates if criteria or raw data updates. The third example here, however, I don't know how to do that with a pivot table. I'm comparing two lists. So I went ahead and used a formula. So formulas have a bunch of uses for data analysis. Now our last topic is we're going to go over to GD1. How do we get data into Excel? Now I'm going to go over to Windows Explorer, and you could see here I have an Access and a text file with comma separated data, and I need to get that data into Excel. So there's two ways. If you have a CVS file, I think that's it's CSV, comma separated values. I spelled that wrong. I'll have to fix that. It's on the master sheet. You could see that huge formula there. Let's see. I come over here. If I change it here, comma separated values, then when I come over to here, it'll be OK. Whew. All right, so one way to do it is to actually open the file. So I'm going to go over to Windows Explorer and open it. And you can see it's in Notepad here. I'm going to copy this and try and paste it over in Excel. Control V. Now, it didn't quite work. You could see it's all in one cell. But notice that there's a smart tag. So use text import wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Now, this is the way you should do it. You should go to Data, Import Data, Text, and then it opens this up. But that's a kind of a cool smart tag. I don't remember what year in Excel it came in. But now we can use this wizard. Right? Delimited means there's some character separating the data. So that's what we want. I'm going to click Next. Now, it's thinking that it should be a space. That's why it's messed up in our preview down here. But no problem. This is comma separated values. And just like that, we can see the preview works perfect. Click Next. In this area, we could format or even skip columns. We don't need to. It's looking good. I'm going to click Finish. And just like that, we have imported our data. Just to show you that you could do it a different way, I'm going to go up to Data. And we have a bunch of different options under Get External Data. I'm going to click Text. I'm going to double click that, and it opens up the same exact wizard, and then click Finish. So there we have it, and click OK. Final example, what if we had some data in Access? We're going to use our data, Get External Data. I'm going to click From Access. I'm going to have to find my Access database. It's going to say, where do I want to put it? I'm going to say right there. Now, actually, that was not a good example of Access because you could have many tables. It would ask you if there were multiple tables which table you want to import. That one only had one table, so it only imported this one item. The table comes in, the data comes in as a table feature, a built-in Excel feature with dynamic ranges, and it automatically has sorting and filtering at the top. So it's relatively easy using the data, get external data, to get data from outside of Excel in various formats into Excel. Wow, that was an epic video. Again, you can click on the bottom for not only the link to download this workbook, but for the table of content to jump to any section you want. All right, we'll see you next video.